He surprises us by coming in studio, and he's walking over right now. It is the congressman.
I'm never nearly as inspired as when I'm sitting across from Chad Hasty, ladies and gentlemen.
We were looking at the phones going, well, we think he's going to come, and then there you come. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's great to be here, and like always, it's great to be home. And it's a whirlwind, Chad.
Yeah.
But we're back, and we've got some great meetings, and I'm glad to meet with you, and by virtue of being on the air with your listeners. So, lots going on. I hope we're going to talk about the president's speech. I
do want to start off with the State of the Union address. Your first State of the Union address as a congressman. You're sitting there. You're watching the president. Overall, what did you think? What'd you like? Anything that you didn't like from the president?
No, I liked it a lot. I thought it was probably his best speech. I thought it was inspirational. I thought it was very positive. I thought it was very bipartisan. I mean, he was calling us as Americans to put America first. That was a big theme. And whether that's, he said, look, we've spent trillions of dollars on infrastructure in other countries. We need to invest in our own infrastructure. We've spent money protecting other people's borders. We need to do our first job, keep Americans safe, secure our borders. And so I think that sort of America first vision is one that, look, we're not going to retreat. This isn't about protectionism. It's recognizing that even though we are the leader of the free world and the superpower, and we have a responsibility as such, we have some real challenges. And after the 8 years of Obama, those challenges have become crises in some regard, and we got to take care of that. We also have to recognize that we don't compete on a level playing field, and we're losing too much of our capacity to make stuff in America. And so we have that perspective in West Texas when it comes to ag producers, but other parts of the country, Ohio, Pennsylvania, have that perspective from coal or from manufacturing steel. And I think that he is right on. We've got to figure out a way to make for a head-to-head competition with American producers and American manufacturers. If we do that, we'll win. What do you say? 60,000 factories have gone away since China entered the WTO. WTO has been a big problem for cotton producers, and we've talked about it on your show. So I'd say that would be the one key element of it, and then restarting America's economic engine, tax reform, reg reform, Obamacare, repeal and replace. And then here's the biggest part, and the Republicans needed to hear this. He was on the House floor. My colleagues in the House need to hear this. Courage and keeping your promises is leadership. Okay? So he said Obamacare's a disaster. Don't forget, it's imploding. Don't forget, guys, what you've been talking about for the last year to year and a half on the campaign trail.
Some longer than that.
Some longer than that. So don't get weak-kneed on me now. He looked, he made the gesture to Nancy Pelosi when he said it's a disaster. Look, I think the intent was I think, good and pure, but centralized planning of our healthcare economy, it has been a failure.
Let's talk real quick about Obamacare, because no one has seen the plan. I'm assuming you haven't seen the plan yet. There was a story in Politico today that House leadership is saying by the end of the month we're going to repeal Obamacare. You've no doubt heard the story. Maybe you saw him. Senator Paul was going around trying to find the copy, the draft of the Obamacare repeal and replace. He couldn't find it, but you have Senate, you have the House Freedom Caucus who've already come out, and again, even though we haven't seen the draft yet, and they say, listen, if these tax credits, these refundable tax credits are part of it, we can't vote on it because it's just an entitlement program. You have Senator Cruz, Senator Lee, Senator Paul who've come out and said anything like Obamacare Light, we can't vote on it. What do you know about the replacement plan so far, and is it Obamacare Light from what you've heard?
So as we talked about before, there are going to be three parts to this. There's the reconciliation That's the budget process by which we can turn off spending and tax dials. We can turn those dials. If it's a policy issue, we have to go back because it requires 60 votes in the Senate. And then there's a host of things that will happen under Tom Price's leadership in the Trump administration at Health and Human Services. And so it's not that it's not complicated, okay? There is some complexity here. I mean, this is 7 or 8 years of this implementation of this behemoth, but we can't let perfect stand in the way of this opportunity. If we do and we don't act now, we'll never repeal it. Let's be clear. Mm-hmm. So let's take on the tax, the individual tax credit, for example. We've got to create a market where health insurance companies are competing for you, me, and your listeners for our business. That competition will drive the cost down, and it will create all kinds of plans and increase the quality of service. Now, right today, and there's history here since World War II, but the tax benefits are on the employer plans, and those who get health coverage through their employer. But there's a host of working class people that don't get insurance from their employer. Mm-hmm. We need to shift that tax incentive, that benefit to people, to the individual. So to suggest that there's subsidy, look, there's already subsidies. The subsidy exists with employers. Employers are negotiating our health care with big insurance and the government. We need to transition that to the individual, and I think that's a smart way to do business. And the majority of Republicans believe that. From
what we have to hit the break here in just a minute or so. Our first break with Congressman Arrington. From what you know, if that shift is moved from the employer to the consumer, you and I, does that mean it's going to hurt the those who get insurance or have insurance through their employer?
No.
Is it going to drive up that cost?
I think that employers are going to have to some employers will have to bear more cost. It's not that we're going to just – I believe we ought to phase that out or phase it down. So there's going to be a debate whether it goes altogether away or it's just phased down to some, maybe it's half of what we subsidize. And then you transition that to the individuals. So that's going to be a phased-in approach. And whether it's to zero or half, sure, I think the employers are going to have to bear some of that cost. But again, you're now giving a seat at the negotiating table to individuals, and you're giving individuals who don't get employment health care a chance to actually enter into healthcare markets.
Well, when we come back, we'll discuss this further because it's a big issue, and it's an issue that Republican voters and those elected officials want to tackle quickly. So we'll come back with that and get to some other issues that the president brought up, and then other issues that Congressman Arrington has seen in Washington, D.C. We'll be right back on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. We have Congressman Jodey Arrington in studio. We're talking about Obamacare and story out of Politico where House leadership, and it looks like House leadership and the White House together moving forward and saying, hey, by the end of the month, we're going to repeal Obamacare. Congressman, we were talking about this and how it would affect those who get their employer-based insurance, how folks who are not, folks who, maybe right now are in Obamacare and they're paying just huge amounts for health insurance. One question that some people may have is, okay, is this going to drive up my price that I pay, through my employer for insurance? Will employers really bear the brunt of that, or are they going to pass it on to me? How's all this going to work out? Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to pay more.
That's and I can appreciate that. And I think that the greater and the more dynamic you create a market in the healthcare space, the more opportunity for choice and the more opportunity for lower cost for everyone, including employers. So yes. While you will draw down the subsidy through tax benefit for employers, and you increase that tax incentive and benefit for individuals, you're just creating a bigger market. And so the idea is that insurance comes down for everybody. Look, it's not just those people on the exchange. Everybody's insurance is going up. The employer insurance is going up.
Yeah.
Most employer-based insurance programs are paying higher deductible. People feel like they're self-insured. I know that when I worked at Grace Health System, my deductible was so high that I don't know that I ever got past the deductible. So I felt like I was self-insured and I was in a health system. So also recognize that 8 million people have paid the penalty, individuals, rather than go on the Obamacare exchange. Mm-hmm. So I think that the fundamentals of the better way, which were, by the way, repeated and reiterated by our president in his speech, is the right way to go.
Will people be penalized if they don't? As far as you know, with any house plan, will people be penalized if they don't have insurance?
No, and the president had the most poignant remark when he said, forcing people to purchase government-run health care is the wrong way to go. And so that's one thing that will come out in the reconciliation, which only takes 51 votes in the Senate. We will repeal the individual and employer mandates, and then we will be able to do, because it has to do with taxes, we'll be able to expand health savings accounts. That will empower individuals, and then we'll be able to put in the tax credit that people are talking about, and that will also empower the individual. Those will come out in reconciliation, okay. And then you got a host of things that will happen at HHSC, and then things like letting small businesses band together and co-ops so that they can, trade associations, so they can actually have greater purchase power. That's a policy change. That's going to require 60 votes. So it's a combination of a lot of things, but listen, if we can't get Obamacare repealed and some replacement in the first phase through reconciliation, then that will be devastating, and I don't know that we get another bite at the apple.
Well, I was about to ask you, and before we take the next break, do your colleagues on the Republican side, and I think you know this because you were just elected, but do your colleagues on the Republican side know that if Obamacare is not, repealed and replaced, if all these promises that Republican voters have been told, it's not going to be good for Republican voters. Forget about Democrats. It's not going to be good for Republican congressmen.
Listen, every party in power in the White House struggles in midterm elections. That's just a historic fact. I think there's a prediction of 30 seats that on average you lose in midterms when you control the White House. That is not good news for Republicans. I know now more than ever being in the majority party is it is tremendously advantageous for Republicans. That is, if you're in the minority, you don't get any influence over the process and over the outcome. If we don't pass the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, if we don't get through this first phase of reconciliation, we will pay dearly. The voters ought to make us pay dearly. So
when we come back, we will continue our visit with nope, we're good. We're good.
Yep,
okay,
we got about
good.
2 minutes left.
Good. All right. I thought we had another break, but I was wrong. Let me ask you about education. The president talked about education being the civil rights issue of our time. He's spoken in favor of school choice. The education secretary spoken in favor of school choice. How do you feel about school choice? How would that affect, and what is the responsibility of the federal government when it comes to school choice nationwide?
Man, I get real nervous talking about public education. I think it's squarely a state issue. I don't, quite frankly, I don't want the federal government involved in public education at all, or a very limited role. The limited role, I mean, maybe to block grants some monies, which is what I think Trump is talking about. Mm-hmm. To the states to let them decide, do you use that for disabled and special needs children, or indigent, rural, or for vouchers? So I'm for the states deciding how they want to do that. I'm all for supporting states through block grants. I do not want a Department of Education, okay? So let's start there. Education, the best investment we can make. It's a public good. We're as strong as our weakest link. I want more competition. It's part of it. Competition of choice is not just good for healthcare, it's good for education, okay? But we can't leave any child behind. And I'm not endorsing that law. I'm just saying we can't leave kids in broken schools. So if we have a voucher system, it's got to be able to be good for every student to get out, not just the best students, students with good, strong families engaged in the process. It has to be for everyone. And if we do that, then, and in some urban areas, I think it's desperately needed. In rural areas, I don't think it's as relevant, quite frankly. We need accountability. We need local control. We need to get rid of teachers that don't do their jobs. We need to reward those that do. So there's a host of things we can do on the public ed side as well.
Right. Congressman, appreciate your time as always. Got a lot of great information.
Great to see you, Chad.